again and welcome to the Hobby Maker Tutorial YouTube channel. This time I'd like to talk to you about tips and tricks, especially if you're a beginner using water-based pens, colouring pencils, water-based pencils and alcohol markers. So the main thing I'd probably like to say is don't panic, don't worry if you go wrong, just enjoy using the products and I'll give you some tips of how to correct each one. So when you're using normal pencils, if you do jolt yourself and go outside of the line, a lot of the pigment can be picked up with a pencil eraser if you gently rub that, as if they were pencils really, graphic pencils. So you can use an eraser rubber to get some of that pigment off. If you're using the watercolour pencils and the water-based pens, then if you've got a bit of pigment outside of the line or a splash of your work on an area that you didn't want it, if you clean the brush that you're using the water with and just put a bit more water down over the pigment, and then you can just soak that up with a paper towel or a tissue and the water just draws that pigment up. So if you just add more water, then you can make some corrections that way. And with the alcohol pens, included in some of the sets, you have like a blender, a colourless blender. Now this pen is really good for correcting your mistakes as well. So if you have an area of pigment that you've got in a place you don't want, just colour over more with the blender, and the alcohol in the blender will weaken the pigment, so that should help remove most of the colour anyway in that way. So tips on using them if you are a beginner: try to hold the pens lightly and use them lightly to start with, and then you can always add more colour and intensify the colour as you go. And that's a good way for layering colour as well, just to start off softly and gently and add more layers as you go. And another tip is, with the pens in particular, it's a good idea to store them laying horizontally so the ink is dispersed across the barrel of the pens rather than storing them upright. See if you can store them flat laying down, and then hopefully they'll last longer in that way. Another tip to mention is sharpening the pencils. Make sure you have a really nice sharp pencil sharpener, because then they're going to sharpen the pencils better and more efficiently for you. Otherwise, the wood of the pencil might start crumbling away, and that happens just because the blade of the pencil sharpener isn't sharp enough. Or if you're feeling brave, you could sharpen them manually with a sharp knife or a scalpel blade, and that gives you, you can really get into the wood earlier down the pencil and create a sort of a longer tip of colour. So that's just a few tips of sharpening them. And then another thing I would say is, if you're struggling a bit with dispersing the pigment in these materials, then maybe it's the paper that you're using. Think again about what paper you're using. Try different papers, experiment with the same pen on different papers. Do swatches, of course, of your sets of pens, because it's nice to see the real colour that the pigment is. And yeah, experiment, try out different things and enjoy your own journey using these materials. So like the video if you've enjoyed listening to the tips, and always subscribe to our channel for some future inspiration.